The American Antiquarian Society is the national research library of pre-20th century American history and culture, and a center of learning where people of all ages, professions, and backgrounds come to study and discuss virtually any and all aspects of American life through the year 1876, and in the case of some collections, up to 1900. Beyond the door, right there, behind that door, are some 4 million items, including newspapers, pamphlets, picture books, broadsides, graphic materials, and manuscripts of all kinds. We have the largest collection of printed materials printed before 1820 in the world. But even today, much of what we do here at the American Antiquarian Society is inspired by our founder, Isaiah Thomas. Our collection is a very democratic one. Democratic with a small d, and we collect the great works of literature, important governmental documents, as well as ephemera, trade cards, menus, advertisements, posters, and yes, rewards of merit, and other materials designed for a specific purpose and then normally discarded. One of our fastest growing collections is the AAS Children's Literature Collection. At 26,000 titles. It ranges from the earliest catechisms printed for the children and youth of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 1650s, through the juvenile novels penned by the likes of Louisa May Alcott and Mark Twain after the Civil War. We have one of the single largest collections of picture books and original illustration artwork produced by late 19th century New York publisher McLaughlin Brothers. And for that reason, we collect American picture books published through the year 1900, so that's an extension from that 1876 cutoff date. In my nearly 30 years as curator of the collection, our children's books have been cataloged with access to a wide array of access points, including those for illustration method, like lithographs, provenance, like presentation inscriptions and drawings, and subjects, like slavery, death, money, and food. This level of cataloging has turned the children's literature collection from a sparsely used resource into a go-to gold mine for researchers. Among the very first researchers to benefit from this in-depth access is this evening's speaker, Pat Crain. Dr. Crain holds a bachelor's degree from Bennington College, later receiving her master's and PhD in English and Comparative Literature from Columbia University. 25 years ago, I first met Pat when she came to AAS as a graduate student on a short-term fellowship. Her topic was the cultures of reading in the American Renaissance. So in a way, this has really informed her entire academic career. She would return to AAS for 2 more fellowships, to my great delight. Working with Pat has been an odyssey of discovery. I've thought a lot about this, Pat. While I was cataloging our 19th century children's books, I found tropes in the collection that to the modern eye seem astounding. For instance, we have numerous editions of both Goody Two-Shoes and The Babes in the Wood, extending from the 1700s right up to 1900, knocking on the doorstep of our very existence here in the reading room. Both titles still exist today in everyday speech as slang expressions. Well, she's a Goody Two-Shoes, and they're like Babes in the Wood. They don't know what they're doing. Okay, that's great, but the actual plots behind the stories to those titles are no longer commonly known. Pat, as a historically grounded literary scholar, was uniquely positioned to examine the cultural work performed by these 2 early mainstays of children's literature, and while doing so, always asking questions of the physical guises these stories took on as broadside ballad, small chapbook, and large picture book. The rigorous questions that she asked of these printed artifacts for children and the answers that she discovered in the course of her research are now evident in her numerous articles and in her books. The story of A, the alphabetization of America from the New England Primer to the Scarlet Letter. fast becoming a classic, and the recently published Reading Children, Literacy, Property, and the Dilemmas of Childhood in 19th-Century America, drawing on the intertwined nature of literacy and property. Pat will be speaking to us today on the Bank of Industry, Rewards of Merit and the Emotional Capitalism of 19th-Century Schoolroom Ephemera. Ladies and gentlemen, Pat Crain.
Can you hear me all right? One mic down, another one has come up. Thank you for that, Laura. That was really incredibly moving. I feel I learned a lot about my work from that, and was horrified at the 25-year mark. So I am almost speechless about my gratitude for being back at the AAS again, which is a kind of research home away from home for me and for so very many scholars, many of whom I'll be mentioning today. So I just want to thank Jim, I want to thank Laura, I want to thank always, inevitably, forever, the catalogers at the AAS. I want to thank Ellen, and I want to thank Jackie Penny on the staff of the AAS, who took a lot of the images that I'll be showing you tonight. The ones that aren't so good are mine, or I pulled them from offline, so the really nice ones are Jackie's. So thanks again, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. I was terrified that we were going to conflict with the Cubbies, or with a debate of some horror from our current world. But instead, we're going to think about rewards of merit. So let me begin. I'll talk more about this particular image in a few minutes. In a New York Times article last July, the writer worried about how to get her kids to read during the summer if they weren't already motivated readers. Friends admitted bribing their children, quote, paying per book, minute, or page in currencies that ranged from Shopkins toys to screen time to cash. A British educational publisher survey found that 60% of parents of 3 to 8-year-olds admitted offering their children rewards for reading. One mother, identified as a learning sciences researcher, offers her daughters a penny a page for summer reading. As for the children, the 10-year-old daughter of that mom was also quoted in this article. "Money is motivating," she said. Well, thus apparently it has always been in the Anglophone modern reading world, in and out of school. The early American bribe I'll be talking about tonight is a delectable item of printed ephemera called the Reward of Merit, one of very few dedicated print genres, dedicated childhood print genres in the 19th century. And I have we have some on display here, and I have a few of my own, thanks to eBay, that you might want to come up and look at afterwards. These are small prizes or premiums. This is Georgie Stevens here, tiny, right? It's very distorting to see them up there. They're handed out in schoolrooms weekdays and Sundays to encourage reading, memorizing, punctuality, deportment, and other sanctioned school behaviors. I've been thinking for a while about children's reading in the 19th century, and one of the things that we see is that children are encouraged strongly to be very attached to their books. But at the same time, much 19th century advice about children's reading expresses fears over a dangerous and too isolating, solipsistic, and even autoerotic absorption in reading. So in the 19th century, children must be very attached to their books on the one hand, and they must not be too attached to their books on the other hand. It's sort of what we say now about iPads and other screen time for the kindergarten and nursery crowd. And thus, this image of boy with a book, this reward of merit, ostentatiously not reading it, is very typical in the 19th century. So the iPad reference that I just made is facile, but it's not idle. That is, focusing more extensively on rewards of merit has made me reckon with a few aspects of children's relation to print and to text, which are not exclusively about reading per se. So first, that relation has always been, historically as it is now, in some sense multimodal. What I mean by that buzzword, multimodal, is that we tend to think that literacy is about books. But we know that it's more than that. Children establish intense relationships with print and text in all sorts of formats in 2016, and that has always been true, even before the digital revolution. Secondly, and this is something I explore further in my recent book, children's reading and children's relation to print constitute a kind of clause in a social contract, which is modeled on the form and style of other social contracts that operate in any given cultural milieu, including even the social contract. And third, such contracts aren't entirely abstract. So the New York Times can joke urbanely about bribes, adding a little guilty spice to everyday parent-child deals or bargains, pay for not play. In the past, such contracts, as I'll hope to show you, were sometimes on paper, including these little papers that I'll be talking about. So they're usually quite small. You can see the size of them. They're usually sort of as small as 1 by 2 inches or 3 by 4 or 5 inches. They're on paper or cardstock, often printed on both sides, but not always. And they display a wide variety of 19th century visual iconography, which is how I first got interested in them. The one with the oval image here at the top with the blanks filled in, you can't read it, but it says, the bearer, Mr. Harvey Hurlburt, filled in by hand, receives this as a token of the praise he merits for his faithfulness and good behavior in school from his teacher, David Pratt. And the one with the little charming little reading vignette is for good behavior, presented to Addie O'Dane by Emma Pierce, teacher. And I'll talk more about how I'm thinking that these operate. According to Patricia Fenn and Albert Malpa's colorful and comprehensive account, the AAS has a copy of it if you want to look at it. It's a great encyclopedic book about rewards of merit. This genre has centuries-old roots in schoolroom culture. In the 19th century US, as the schoolroom became increasingly democratic and paper type and image-making technologies grew increasingly cheap, the genre achieved increasing ubiquity. Two educational movements imported from Britain and spreading quickly in the first decades of the 19th century took to rewards of merit wholeheartedly. First was the Sunday school movement, which began from the 1790s on to teach children who were at work, not at school, during the week. But it soon expanded, as we know, to the Sunday school movement that we still have, to include middle-class school children as well. And the second movement is Joseph Lancaster's monitorial system. So Lancaster's monitorial system, a very important and sort of very understudied mode of pedagogy in the 19th century, had a revolutionary effect on US education at the beginning of the 19th century. In London, Lancaster had taught hundreds of children in large classrooms with the help of older children, as you can see in this image, performing as monitors or teaching assistants. This system went global quickly. into hundreds of schoolrooms. It really was a worldwide pedagogical phenomenon in the early 19th century. Across the British Empire, in Russia, in Latin America, and across the United States. By 1820, some 150 schools in the U.S., from urban schooling, like the London schools, to schools out on the frontier in Georgia, in Tennessee, and out in Cincinnati and Detroit. As one contemporary account described this system approvingly, quote, "The scholars themselves were made the instruments of their own instruction. Economizing was crucial for schools like these that relied largely on charity." Now, Lancaster helped to spread the idea of handing out these rewards in classrooms. And he describes how he means to use them. And the blue ticket here is the kind of ticket that he would be handing out, slightly different mode. But what he says is reward tickets are usually inscribed with the word merit, so sort of compressing the reward of merit. They're printed on a small size that the pupil who obtains them may be able to treasure up a large number in small compass. So you could have many of these rewards and sort of stick them in your pocket. The tickets, he says on this slide, the tickets are of small value and may be given even for care in forming a single letter, writing a word, reading, or working a sum. They possess relative value by the power of accumulation. The interest excited by this species of paper currency affords a cheap, expeditious, and almost incredibly powerful stimulant. 10,000 in caps. Tickets have been in possession of meritorious boys at one time, preserved with the greatest care and often exhibited to parents, friends, and relatives with pleasure and exultation. Here, Lancaster sets, in hyperbolic terms, but nonetheless sets the terms for the meaning of these rewards in the emergent key words of modern finance and banking: value, relative value, accumulation, paper currency. He promotes competition and exchange with a proleptic hint towards conspicuous consumption, as he imagines his students preserving and exhibiting the rewards with pleasure and exultation. Once amassed in this system, tickets could be traded in, hundreds and sometimes many hundreds, he says, and occasionally thousands of tickets being needful to purchase a prize. Rewards like these and the system behind them survived after other aspects of Lancaster's pedagogy declined in use by about 1850. And they circulated everywhere that students were over much of the 19th century in this sort of ticket form and also in this other form. Sunday school scholars, too, could get rewards for attendance, punctuality, deportment, or reciting verses, and they could trade them in for religious tracts or prints, and sometimes for just money. Asa Bullard, associated with the Massachusetts Sabbath School Society, recounts in his memoir that one Abigail Follansbee, aged 10, quote, "In a little less than 6 months, committed to memory the book of Matthew and the 119th Psalm, containing 1,199 verses, together with 22 texts consisting of 54 verses, 20 hymns, 44 scripture proofs, and 1 tract. Also, the principal part of the Assembly Shorter Catechism." Bullard doesn't report how many merit tickets Abigail won for these incredible accomplishments, or what she traded them in for. But like many education writers of the time, he approved of rewards of merit and other certificates in Sabbath school. He found them handy not only for rewarding the predictable constancy and punctuality in attendance, as he says, but also, as many other accounts confirm, for bringing in new scholars to Sunday school in a kind of Amway or Mary Kay marketing scheme. So here's Asa Bullard's journal, The Wellspring, in 1846, and he is printing a sample of the kind of certificate that you could buy in quantity and pass out to students who would bring in other clients of the Sunday school. This beautiful certificate, as the caption says, will be given for each new student. And, quote, to everyone who receives 5 of these certificates is promised a book. So bring in 5 of your pals and you get a book. Or the caption goes on, you can just preserve the certificate to gaze upon with pleasure 10, 15, or 20 years hence, remembering, you know, what a good little Sunday school student you were and how many friends you roped into coming to Sunday school. Scholars like Paul Gutschar and David Nord, both also alum of the AAS, have highlighted the ways in which religious publishing more or less invented the mass media and the mass market in the 19th century with innovative modes of sales and circulation. Rewards of merit, I want to say, participate in spreading the word, both the good word and the profitable one. This catechism, a 1-cent reward, drills some of the grimmer parts of Genesis. Abraham and Isaac, Sodom and Gomorrah, all tidily priced at a penny. As rewards like this one show, with its cool mingling of God and mammon, rewards of merit exist exactly at the nexus between a kind of sentimental or spiritual economy of piety, affection, and attachment, and a market or capitalist economy of competition, profit, and loss. Like children themselves, the rewards tend to oscillate back and forth, as do the debates. There are many debates about their use in the 19th century. And they point up the ways in which affective and economic regimes, then as now, are intertwined. The sociologist Eva Illouz calls this, and this was part of my title, emotional capitalism, when, here's a quote from Illouz, affect is made an essential aspect of economic behavior and in which emotional life, especially that of the middle classes, follows the logic of economic relations and exchange. Following the logic of currency, one of the main jobs of the rewards, sometimes above and beyond their exchange value, is sheer circulation, being abroad in the land, advertising and promoting themselves. Rewards of merit are both ephemeral missionaries and, in a funny way, also missionaries of ephemera. Thus, a little squib in the American Sunday School Union's Youth's Friend and Scholars magazine of 1823 recounts the story of a Sabbath school ticket, which would have looked something like these. I don't think you can read these, but these would be very tiny, about 1 inch by 2 inches, with Bible verses. So the top one here reads, "There is none righteous, no, not one," from Romans 3:10, and "draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you," from James 4:8. So the little story or parable, a Sabbath school ticket was dropped in the street by a scholar in Petersburg. A lady passing that way in her carriage discovered it and, supposing it to be a treasury note or a small bill, such as were then used for change, ordered her servant to bring it to her. He did so when, lo, instead of its representing a small amount of earthly treasure, she found upon it the following words: "What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" The inquiry was deeply impressed upon her mind. In vain she sought then the circles of folly and dissipation. The thought still pressed upon her mind, what shall it profit? Nor did she ever rest till she was brought to the feet of Jesus. For the lady in the street, the usual classroom practice, recite verses, earn a ticket, is reversed. She lunges at the ticket's exchange value and then learns the verse. It's a common trope of Sunday school literature that rewards of merit can fall into the hands of unsuspecting passers-by, turning the bustle of street life into bibliomancy. In stories like this, it's when the ticket falls out of circulation that it performs its most important work. It suddenly hails the recipient with the Augustinian imperative, tolle, lege, take up and read. Such anecdotes perform the magic that 19th century sentimental culture likes to perform on things that clink like cash. That is, they make the buck stop here by making it stop being a buck at all. Now I want to look a little more closely at how rewards of merit both disavow and advertise their resemblance to money. So this charming but homely example is a Sunday school reward probably from the 1830s. The poem on the back, I won't read the whole thing, but it opens by saying that the little boy expresses thanks for the tender care of each unwearied friend who sought and found us when and where we wished not to attend. Early on every Sabbath morn, they bring us gently in. So maybe the folks who were getting the certificate to bring some callers in would get the little boy and bring him in. We might be struck by the inoculating effect of the image of child and cat, perhaps both wishing not to attend, with the ventriloquized gratitude of the little boy on the other side. But the cartouches on either side brand or authenticate the slip. Get that in there, please. As authenticated as a reward of merit. And even in this relatively unornamented example, you can see the mimicry of banknotes in the design and the horizontal orientation of the page. So banknotes, we know what banknotes look like, but they're very festive and interesting in the 19th century because they're completely unstable and they're local, with local banks and worth nothing half the time. But and there's a wide array of design. And here's yet another one where you can just sort of see the similarity in the mise-en-page in the page setup. And they also share not only the setup, but also the blanks. This is certified by somebody in the name of somebody else. And so they look also like stock certificates, the same language of certification, a kind of bureaucratic authentication that the little rewards are imitating. So what's striking here to me, and characteristic of the reward of merit, and characteristic, I want to say, of a great deal of other children's literature, for that matter, is their straight-faced gravitas and the ways in which they miniaturize institutional forms that in their full-size version constitute social, financial, and legal bonds and obligations. And for one thing, these little rewards like this feel to me like practice scripts for a future rather like our own, filled with inscriptions, filling out forms, the habit of giving and receiving, ceremonial and bureaucratic papers that mark social bonds. And the rewards, it seems to me, infuse these basically bureaucratic practices with positive affect in childhood. Children must learn to love their books in the 19th century, but rewards of merit tell us that they are also asked to cherish, as well as to accumulate, exchange, and display little scraps of paper. The high rhetorical style of the key words of 19th century merit, punctuality, diligence, approbation, esteem, elevate and valorizes the boy with the golden cat, With that esteem and approbation, the social life of the reward of merit embeds itself deeply into the social life of the school, the community, and the family, distinguishing the new work of childhood, going to school and learning to read, as sharing in the institutional forms of public and economic life. These forms imply, when they don't aggressively demand, a contract-like agreement between children, parents, and teacher. One reward shows how this works in a dialogue between the children and their parents. Beloved parents, this will tell, it's waving a reward, that we have learned our lessons well. If she's good till the week is through, little sister will have one too. And then the parents reply, children who well perform their part always rejoice a parent's heart. Such children's joy we fondly trace, mantled high on a blooming face. This little dialogue marks the print as a kind of letter from the teacher to the parents, with the child as the medium of transmission. Children's part to perform in life's drama is represented as a vague admonition to be good and to express a mere joy at the resulting parental approbation. So there's quite a little feedback loop here. But all such contracts that the child has no power to consent to also convey a slight threat. What if little sister isn't good this week? Well, rewards often work like this one as a medium of communication from teacher to parents with child as messenger. The archive can sometimes reward us with the other half of the exchange. Thus, here's a certificate, not exactly a reward of merit, but it was too juicy to leave out. It's a certificate marking the end of a quarter session in which Henry Child was ranked 10th in a class of 27, not bad, at the Franklin Grammar School in 1829 in Boston. His father writes back, using the back of the certificate, I don't know if you can quite make it out. He says, I am highly pleased with the statement given of the character and standing of my son at school as per this certificate, handed me by him from you this evening, and hope he will continue to merit your approbation and advance himself in rank. Please, sir, accept my grateful acknowledgments for your arduous labors in his and the public's behalf. There's something to me very touching about this. It's as if in 1829 he's not quite getting it about what these are for. And he's sort of initiating an epistolary correspondence with the teacher on the back, with his son's teacher on the back of the certificate. But it's a paper whose work is already done. That's it. This is all you're getting. Now, by the 1850s, such a misreading would be pretty impossible, as certificates and many rewards announced their status as a festive kind of currency, more self-aware or self-reflexive than some earlier examples, and cheerfully embracing sentimental print capitalism. So this kind of wonderful bank of industry, this is dated August 28, 1856, the Bank of Industry will pay 2 honors to Sylvanus Courier, signed by Mary E. Gove, teacher. So in addition to the musical putti on either side and the sort of pictorial wharf on the top, we also have, interestingly, this very elaborate copyright statement here. And so what we've got here, this copyright statement seems to form a kind of link between the play of the schoolroom bank and the printer's world of actual legal obligations and protections. And then these fantastic, and we have some of these from the collections on display here. These sort of the saturated colors They're so pretty and festive. They're this size, you can see, available on eBay. So there's a lot to feast your eyes on here, and I'm just going to point out a few things. The engraving, as you can see, is extremely elaborate. Fenn and Malpa, in their great comprehensive book, point out that for a lot of engravers who did banknotes, they also did these. I think not these particular printers, but you can imagine that it would be very easy to just crank out some rewards of merit. Here they are in pink. Like the authenticating mottos on currency, in God We Trust, for example, we have a couple of mottos here. We have at the bottom, God offers reward, my teacher does the same, they both encourage me. But then I don't know if you can see, there's more words there. So I turned this one upside down so you can maybe see it. Where knowledge is a duty, ignorance is a crime, is written in that book. As in many of these vignettes, it's an oversized book that takes two laps to hold, miniaturizing the children, hyperbolizing the book. All of this color-saturated pastoral luxury is supported, however, a little strangely, by the iron business of the distant train rushing off to the southwest corner of the image. Here it is in pink. Compare this to the stock certificate that we were looking at for the Syracuse and Utica Railroad Company. Here are two trains heading towards each other. Transportation infrastructure, it would appear, is equally important to both enterprises. Here's another National Bank of Merit, 20 shares of stock to the holder. And yet what's apparently in the vaults of the National Bank of Merit are all the tropes of sentimental and patriotic pedagogy, the tutor reading, the child reciting, a reading girl or not reading girl, and the patriotic flag. This is during or after the Civil War. Like all financial instruments, rewards of merit have the capacity to activate that range of ugly feelings that those who oppose rewards of merit worry about. Greed, longing, envy, resentment, pride. Tom Sawyer, for example, characteristically trades for rewards of merit to get a prize, as Twain says, worth 40 cents in those easy times. And at this moment, Tom Sawyer came forward with 9 yellow tickets, 9 red tickets, and 10 blue ones, and demanded a Bible. This was a thunderbolt out of a clear sky. Walters was not expecting an application from this source for the next 10 years, but there was no getting around it. Here were the certified checks. Twain is so careful to sort of identify these as certified checks. They were good for their face, this sort of language of finance. It was the most stunning surprise of the decade. Then the boys, of course, were eaten up with envy. Those who suffered the bitterest pangs were those who perceived too late that they themselves had contributed to this hated splendor by trading tickets to Tom. Here's Tom Sawyer as future Gilded Age mogul. And here's Twain shrewdly parsing the capitalist arena of the classroom and schoolyard, and here, Sunday school exhibit day. For Tom, as for many holders of rewards, these aren't actually miniaturized. They're not static imitations of other genres. They are meant to be earned by the labor of memorizing Bible verses, which 19th century children prodigiously did. But Twain shrewdly understands how capitalism really works. The value in other people's work redounds to the one who can work the system, like Tom. But Twain uses them again later. Remember, Tom is 1876, Huck is 1884, with yet darker emotions. If in Tom Sawyer, Twain satirizes the marketplace of the Sunday school, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn underscores the reward's affective value. The fact that Huck has, quote, a little blue and yellow picture of some cows and a boy, incites Pap, who has made an unexpected and unwelcome return at the beginning of Huck Finn, full of resentment at Huck's new life. What's this, says Pap. It's something they give me for learning my lessons good. He tore it up and says, I'll give you something better, I'll give you a cowhide. Pap recognizes, not mistakenly, a relationship between the picture of the cow and old-fashioned cowhide. Pap can see that Huck is succeeding in a system that replaces old disciplines with encouraging prizes. Much of the force of the scene relies on Huck's unarticulated identification with and emotional investment in the schoolroom gift. It's as gifts, of course, that they memorialize a relationship between the teacher, who signs her, very, very often her, name, and the student, whose name she fills in, it fills into the blank. In their mingling of mass printedness with personalizing script, they share with other schoolroom and children's culture genres, like the autograph book, the scrapbook, and the gift book, the hand marking of their transition from commodities into individualized personal belongings. From the point of view of printers, of course, rewards of merit are mainly a flourishing commodity. So here is a commodity form of some of the rewards that I was showing you. So the materials, so they're a staple of job printing, one of the blank forms that they crank out. The material conditions of the print shop mean that inevitably there are surprising coincidences of imagery. So we have Schoolhouse meeting Steakhouse on the left, Bertha Hugg's reward for industry, punctuality, and good conduct, and on the right, the labor reform ticket. They share this image, a romantic allegory of labor. The sharing probably means nothing but that the same stereotype image was floating around, used by two printers. Still, there's something resonant in the fact that the Labor Reform Party supported women's suffrage to the likes of Bertha Huggs. If one might have progressive dreams for Bertha Huggs, what we usually see in rewards of merit, as I've been trying to show, oscillates between more or less intimate and affectionate human relations, coded as esteem and approbation, and the mastery of new bureaucratically inflected modes, diligence, deportment, a ubiquitous attention to attention itself, and an obsession with regulated clock time's new requirement, punctuality. Rewards of merit are the schoolhouse version of all the other blank forms that job printers produced in the 19th century. Banknotes, receipts, bills of lading, tickets, contracts, and so on. Media historian Lisa Gittleman, another alum of the AAS, has pointed out that blank forms like the ones I just mentioned are one small part of the way that bureaucracy assumes an objective character in which, she says, affect drops out in the blank form. But for the children's genre of rewards of merit, it is crucial to their acculturating work that it is exactly affect that is built into them, and sometimes then heaped on top of them. Many rewards of merit are extant not only because hundreds of thousands or more were printed, but also because they were kept as souvenirs, keepsakes, and like a lot of childhood ephemera, as memorials. So this evocative little slip with a night sky, according to the catalog, documents the birth and death of its owner, Miss Millie Rockwood, who, when alive, was certified by her punctual attendance, diligence, and good behavior to merit the approbation of her friends and instructress, Vesta Littlefield. Before her death at age 6, she had acquired at least 2 more rewards that are in the AAS collections, probably at Sunday school. New writing on her reward here. Born 1818, died July 1824 is added to the original inscriptions, repurposing the little scrap. If it once looked a little like currency and circulated to recognize the new work of childhood in the 19th century, it now functions more like a prayer card. So I'm just going to wrap up with one more point. Towards the end of the century, these little papers had become commonplace and lost some of their original attraction as the demotic form of high culture's ceremonial parchments or legal black letter, and were reduced in a way to mere currency. A dialogue in an 1870 children's magazine of the American Sunday School Union captures their changing status. So this is the little rewards anecdote. Teacher, I've got 6 tickets for good behavior at school. The one who gets the most is to have a beautiful chromolithograph, a fancy print, at the end of the session, and I'm going to try my best to get it. For Pa says if I do, he will make me a present too. Won't that be so nice? And then teacher says, yes, Nettie, and I hope you will win them both. And there is another reward I want you to obtain, a beautiful crown promised to those who love Jesus. So the chromos that are up for grabs for Nettie are the newly and increasingly cheaply available lush chromolithographs that become objects of desire at home as in school towards the end of the century. Instead of a Bible, for example, students might now receive an already nostalgic version of themselves in the new and exciting, or of their dog, in the new and exciting technology. In the Sunday school's compromised position, though, the dialogue doesn't expect Nettie to forego the chromo, but rather to have the chromo and Christ too, and a gift from Pa. In these chromos, the image pretty much takes up all the space of the card. It's all decoration. The contractual work of the rewards of merit was no longer really necessary, partly because schooling was mostly towards the end of the century, increasingly it was broadly compulsory. And the mediation of the reward of merit between child and teacher and through the medium of the child between teacher and parent was replaced by grades inside school and by the mediation of the truant laws on the outside of school. But also I would say the image has just become that much more of a compelling and mesmerizing eyeful than these little, as much as we might love them, than these little rewards of merit. So the emergent emotional capitalism of the schoolroom had been overtaken by full-on conspicuous consumption. So on that note, I thank you for your diligent attention and commend you to the approbation and esteem of your friends.